There are so many expectations for Utah this season. At least for me, they were my favorite going into the Big 12, their first season there. And also, this is kind of supposed to be Kyle Whittingham's kind of swan song in a sense of, okay, maybe they would win the Big 12, possibly make a college football playoff appearance, and assuming that run goes well, win 9, 10 games, and then hand off the reins to Morgan Scaly. But unfortunately, this season has just been a complete disaster, unfortunately, for a number of reasons. I mean, if you want to start, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, seems to be the biggest issue in particular. Cam Rising, at least to me, all this year, never really seemed 100% healthy as the season kind of progressed. And to me, the tipping point of this season was in that Arizona State game where Cam Rising was essentially playing on one foot, but yet they inexplicably still let him play in the game. And I get you probably don't have a lot of confidence in Isaac Wilson and Brandon Rose. They're younger quarterbacks, and hey, I get all that, but to have what's now your seventh year quarterback out there who's playing on one foot, it's unreasonable, and it was a testament to all of the struggles that Utah has had offensively this year. And pretty much, the conversation of, hey, Andy Ludwig, hey, my best friend, we go 20 years back to when I first started at Utah in 2005. A lot of great memories together. I also think about that 2008 undefeated season as well, where Ludwig was also an offensive coordinator. He also had some stints at Cali Pie, Fresno State, Oregon, UCal, Wisconsin, and Vandy. So, he's definitely a well-experienced offensive coordinator. But it probably was for the best that hey, they kind of went their separate ways. And, quite frankly, Andy Ludwig really has nothing to prove at this point. I mean, he's been coaching offensive football for, been offensive coordinator for the past 25 years now. And it probably is for the best to have another voice in there. Mike Bujakan, who's, was the Northwestern offensive coordinator under Pat Fitzgerald from 2020 to 2023, also has extensive experience as an OC at Central Michigan, Cincy, Tennessee, quarterbacks coach at Tampa under Lovie Smith, or no, Dirk Cutter, and helped coach Jameis Winston for his first couple years in the NFL, and was also at Boston College too under Steve Adiazo. So, needless to say, Kyle Whittingham has always had some well-experienced offensive coordinators on staff. But, if you watch this team this year, the defense for the most part has been fairly solid. I mean, if you think about some of the earlier games in the year, I mean, they obviously have your standard tune-up game versus Southern Utah. You did a pretty good job at shutting down Ollie Gordon. You played a Baylor team that really has nothing to lose at the beginning of the year. And it kind of all fell apart, really, in my opinion, in that Arizona State game where, nothing was getting going. There wasn't really any sort of creativity. And you can definitely tell that they just didn't have much confidence in their quarterback. And, with that said, you kind of have to ask yourself, where do you go from here if you're the Utah Utes? I mean, if we're kind of jumping a little bit into the 2025 class, I mean, they're ranked 50th right now. And, Morgan Scaly, he's been with Utah since 2006 when he was an administrative assistant and a graduate assistant, and has since worked his way up. So I don't sense any sort of difference in, how the culture's going to be and how the program's going to be. Cause he's kind of been in waiting for such a long time too, that I think all of that will be a natural transition and all that's going to work out. But when you look at this schedule moving forward too, I mean, you play a ranked BYU team this weekend, then you play Colorado, Iowa State, and UCF. I mean, talk about a gauntlet for a team that has, for the most part, essentially been a disaster. It's just hard to. It's just been really disappointing too, because as somebody who has all the respect in the world for Kyle Whittingham, it's really been a disappointment, and something that, I just as a college football fan really wanted to see. I mean, 20 years at the school, what I admire about him most is his interviews. He's such a gritty player, and he wears his pride on his sleeve. And, the competitor in him just doesn't, at least in my opinion, it doesn't come off as, I just can't imagine this being his last season, because even let's say they're 4-4 now, even if they drop those last 4 games of the year and they go 4-8 this year, I just have a really hard time imagining that Kyle Whittingham would be okay with that being his last season. But yet again, I think one of the reasons why this whole conversation came up to begin with was I believe, don't, if I misquote me, please comment on the video, but I believe his father passed away at around age 65 or 66 and was also a football coach as well. And I think there could be an issue of, hey, wanting to spend more time with family and doing all that too. And also, I mean, just the grind of being a college football coach now. I mean, when he started, back in 2005, 2006, I mean, you didn't have to, when you had transfers come in, hey, they sat for a season and you had relative stability when it came to your staff and your players, and now it's just a completely different game. So it definitely is worth asking, does he want to put up with that for another season or two? Because at this point in time, you really don't have that strong of a recruiting class. There's definitely some questions in terms of who your quarterback's going to be. I don't see a plausible way that you would be okay with bringing back Cam Rising for what would be his 8th season. He'd be 26 years old. I mean, I'm 20. I mean, shit, I'm 27. So I mean, imagine me, in a Utah football helmet. That would not go well. So I mean, just all things considered, there's definitely just a lot more questions than answers right now. And Locked On College Football also had an episode too regarding this exact conversation, and I'm sort of in the same boat as they are. I think there's still a lot more questions that need to be answered. I don't think anyone's really going to have a deliberate response until perhaps the UCF game or something like that, because from what I've seen of Utah football over the past couple of years, I mean, I just don't get the vibe that he's the type of coach that would want a big song and dance for him retiring. I think he would say, hey, I left the program in a great place. I'm well adored and respected by the state of Utah and the community there. You have your transitional coach, who I think will also be great as well. He has a strong defensive background, and all of that's going to work out fine. It's just, how do you handle that? It's such a sensitive situation. But I mean, you think back to, for example, you want to talk about an NFL lens where Seattle pretty much let Pete Carroll go, or pretty much forced him to quit. And we also could be finding the same sort of situation with North Carolina this year and Mac Brown, where they might let him go too, even though I've always been a pretty firm believer in, hey, if your coach has pretty much dedicated their entire life to your football program, you can put up with, a crappy season or two and let him walk off the way he wants to walk off. And, just how much loyalty that a lot of the Utah Utes staff and fans have had over the years. I just don't get the impression that they would ever force him out, nor do I agree that they should, because at the same time, it's his job for as long as he wants it. So I'm definitely fascinated with how that turns out, because in a sense too, I've been talking with other insiders about this too, and the general gist I've got is it's going to be a significant rebuild at this point. I mean, yes, you have some solid foundational pieces on defense. However, a lot of them are getting older. You definitely have some question marks on the offensive side of the football. You don't have as many weapons as you would like. Your offensive line is decent, but you're still going to need some depth for the next seasons coming up. And when you put this all together, it's really difficult for me to sit there and say, okay, even if he had another, let's just say 2 seasons, if he had another 2 seasons, I'm having a really hard time believing that this Utah team could contend for a Big 12 championship in a season or two. To me, this year was kind of the make or break season in terms of them having the swan song, the going away party, the what have you, of hey, they would win the Big 12 in their first season, go to the college football playoff, and wherever the chips land, that's where it would land. And let's not understate this too. I mean, having so much success in the Pac-12, all of those victories for USC fans. Sorry, USC. And I briefly alluded to the 2008 undefeated season. So there's been so much success along the way, and he's brought so much credibility to this program. And I think no matter what happens, I think I think Utah fans should be proud of what this team has accomplished over the past 20 years. And quite frankly, Kyle Whittingham is a big reason why this program is on the map. But I think as a college football fan, I would love to have him back for another season. But there's just so many another season or two. But at the same time, he doesn't owe Utah fans anything. He doesn't owe me anything. He doesn't owe anyone anything. He can do whatever he wants, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen. But as a fan, hey, I definitely want him back for another season or two. But I think objectively speaking, you're going to be walking to a rebuild for at least the next 2 seasons. And there's just so many question marks in terms of, I don't think Morgan Taylor would necessarily leave for another job or anything, but you have to ask yourself, when is it appropriate for that to happen? And what does Kyle Whittingham really want to do at this point of his life and his career?